Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
You have to set your boundaries. You have to say, no, I deserve better. I deserve my boundaries to be heard. I deserve my boundaries to be met. I deserve somebody who understands my past and to work with me and not force me into something.
Hello and welcome to Seven on Sundays, the podcast about how young adults are navigating sex, relationships, and life today.
We are your hosts, Dr. Chez, Leeby, and Stephanie Boye, and each week we will share our candid conversations with young adults and experts about today's tough topics.
I want to warn our listeners that today's show will not be an easy listen. Our guest, Ruth, has experienced a lot of sexual trauma, and she is a survivor in every sense of the word. She feels passionately about helping others, which is why I love doing this episode with her. I think it really freed her in a lot of ways. But there are times that we had to stop our recording so that she could compose herself because the wounds are very deep for Ruth. Please take caution when listening to this episode.
I also want to suggest that people that listen to our show start to take note of the myths that come up. We're going to talk about that in our after show and more about the trauma, of course, but also just start to take note of the myths that are out there because they start to be really clear to us. So welcome to the show, Ruth. So happy to have you.
Do you want to jump in and just start telling us your story?
Yeah. So my story is just, it's definitely trauma filled. So I have two main relationships I'll go over today. The first person, just for this, I'm just going to say person one, person two. The first person I met when I was between 17 and 18. So I met this person actually at a nightclub back where I'm from. And this person was 2 years older than me. And we had dated for about 4.5 years. Now, during this time, the relationship, it started off fun. It was nice. But then it went into being kind of weird. This person became very aggressive in a way with trying to get sex. We would just be hanging out, watching a TV show, and this person would just want sex out of nowhere. And if I didn't comply with this person would make me feel so terrible until I complied. I didn't really know what to do with that because when I first met this person, they made me feel like I was pretty, that it was nice to feel almost wanted in a way. And I know I'm kind of jumping around in this for a minute here, but 2 years into the relationship, like we moved in together, right? And this person started to become really possessive of me. I would just be hanging out home, and one situation was one of my friends invited me to a bonfire, and my boyfriend thought that was cheating. And so he started to use certain things as punishment. So he would use oral and anal sex as punishment to me. So if I did anything wrong, that was my punishment. So he would actually forcefully grab the back of my head and force me to do oral sex. And Sorry, this is
Thank
Take
you.
your time. Take all
Yeah.
the time you need.
I can tell you're very emotional, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share this story. And I know you're going to explain why you want to share your story too.
so he would keep doing the oral sex until he would come and he would hold my head to force me to swallow, and I would be crying, and he would just hold my head there until he was finished and until I was crying so bad and throwing up. And if I didn't do that, he would force me into doing anal, and it wasn't even starting it off nice and gently. It was literally rip down my pants and shove it in. And he would do that until he was finished.
Root, I just want to interrupt for a second just to kind of help you get grounded because I want your body, heart, soul, mind to know this is OVER. You survived, you made it, this is over. So let's just take a minute. We can all three do it because when one person does it, I feel like we all kind of collectively shift things. But I want you to know it's over because what happens when we tell a trauma story is we can get back there so fast, the mind can or the body can, and then we have that kind of residue of all the stuff that's not dealt with. So I just want us to get there so that we can do it right now. Like it's not therapy, it's just let's ground. So if you can put your feet, if you have bare feet, that's better. But if you can put your feet on the ground, just kind of ground yourself for a minute. Take a moment to be here now and say here now and notice whatever you notice in the here and now. If you hear birds or you hear, whatever, any kind of noise around, just breathe in that and keep saying here now to yourself just for a few minutes, few seconds. Okay. Are you here now? Root,
All right. All right.
how do you feel?
I didn't realize how much when you were reliving it, really how much emotion comes back to it.
And you're sharing it with us. You're sharing it with a larger audience. You're so brave. And I just can't thank you enough because there's so many people who are going to hear this, who are going to have a similar experience, and you are going to be the catalyst for them to either understand their situation and understand they don't need to be in that situation, and hopefully to get out of a bad and abusive. This is a rapey relationship. You were sexually abused in this relationship. This is a lot. And I like that Dr. Chez told you to ground. And I think it's very interesting that your pseudonym is Root.
Ooh.
And
Oh, I just had chills on that.
this
Oh
is
my gosh, you
that's-
chose that. You need to root. Oh my God, that's good.
actually why
You have that
I have
name.
chosen that name, because
I just got chills too.
Oh, total
we
chills.
need to get rooted to find ourselves again.
Yes.
And
Root, that is
that's
so
actually
good.
why I chose that for myself.
You
So-
rock. Okay,
There's
that's so good.
So it took me 4.5 years in this relationship, and I woke up one day, literally just woke up one day and said, I can't do this anymore. I cannot be feeling like this. I cannot be treated this way. And I will not be in this situation anymore. And I told this person, I'm done. I deserve better than this. And I know it's out there, and you are not the one. Because if you were the one, I would not be treated this way. Now, it took me quite a while to find another person. I did date a little bit in between, but that goes into my next person.
Okay, let's just stop for a second because I do have some questions about the first
Okay.
relationship that if you're okay with addressing.
Yeah.
You said that he made you feel so terrible. How did he make you feel so terrible? Like, what were the things he said that made you feel as though you were wrong or you were bad in that relationship, that you messed up?
It wasn't really what was said. It was, if I had done something, he would be like, this isn't right, this is cheating, you know, you shouldn't be talking to another guy, even if it wasn't romantic in nature, even if it was just going to hang out with some friends and there were going to be guys there, guys I had known for years. And he would turn around and be like, no, this isn't right. You can't be doing this. If you want to stay in this relationship, you need to ask for my forgiveness. And this is all I'll accept, for
And
you to forgive me, or for me to forgive you, is you're going to do, you can either do oral or anal if you want me to forgive you for this.
so did he call it punishment? Did he say your punishment for this?
No, he would say it as, this is what you're going to do if you want me to forgive you. He never called it punishment. It was always, this is what you're going to do if you want me to forgive you.
So I need Dr. Chez to reply to that because I don't have the words, but I know that when, obviously he's keeping you away from your friends, your family, that is not a healthy relationship. You should be able to have friends, attractive, unattractive, male, female, it doesn't matter. That's, a healthy relationship is one where you're able to have that. But Dr. Chez, maybe you can jump in.
Yeah, I have a question. So, did you do oral sex with him outside of this punishment thing? Or was it only when there was something like that?
It was only when there was something like that, because I personally don't like doing that. And
And he knew that.
yep, and he definitely knew.
Okay. Okay, that was one question. My other question was, you moved out with him when you were, maybe 20 or 19 or something. Did your family accept him? And like, did anybody or did you see the red flags outside of this stuff? Like, was your family okay with you moving in with him? That was like a good situation in their mind.
I mean, my dad and I had kind of like a rocky relationship, so he really didn't have an opinion. My mom was kind of like on the fence. It was my older sibling that really said, no, this person is not good for you. And me and my older sibling would get into physical altercations because they just wanted to let me know that this person wasn't good, and to try to make me understand that. And I was like, no, I love this person, it's just going through a rough patch. And I think when it hit closer to the end of the relationship, and I would go to like family dinner over my mother's, and my mother would see the bruises on me, would see that I would just kind of flinch at things. I think that's really when my mother started to say, hey, what's going on here? but
Yeah.
I didn't really see it until it was far too late. And then, like I said, I woke up one morning, I was like, I'm done. It's over.
Yeah. Thank God. Okay. I asked that because usually in these situations, I mean, Steph is right. This is sexually and physically abusive, right? And emotionally. It covers all of it. But usually when you're in it, you don't have the perspective to see and you keep having hope. There's this hope that things will be different. These are like common things with these kind of relationships. But outside people, there's usually one person that is like, that's just, it doesn't seem right. Even though they don't really know what goes on behind closed doors, they don't see it. So your older sibling seeing that, I want to share that with the audience because a lot of times we brush that off as no, they just don't like him or they don't know, what he's possible, to be or whatever. And the truth is that those red flags or those gut feelings, somebody out there kind of does see, whether it's your friends, your family, whoever. But we don't want to listen to that because we want to have hope, right? That this person's going to do what they say and be a good person or whatever. Or you're young, like you were very young.
I agree completely. You're in such almost a euphoria, you know. You're in such almost an illusion that this is love. That that when the good times are good, they're great. And when it's bad, you're like, okay, well, this person isn't like this all the time.
Right.
So
They're not.
it's just I did something wrong. So you try not to do something wrong because you know what's gonna happen. And they're good outside of that.
Walking on eggshells, I think, is a red flag. When you're
It
walking
is.
when you're walking on eggshells around somebody, that is a red flag. So he was holding your head while you were performing oral sex, and you and I had talked about this before, and I think that this is, in this case, this is very abusive. I think there are a lot of young people who this happens to. In fact, I know it happens to a lot of young people because Dr. Chez and I have done a poll of a lot of people, young people that we know, and it seems as though oral sex while holding your head is very common in this generation. It is a porn thing. I'm going to use a term. It's called face fucking, and it is a thing in porn. And this is obviously what was done to you. Did you?
Can I ask you something, Steph?
Yeah.
More than just holding your head, as
That,
Ruth was saying, it is a physical push down. You cannot move. Like, it's
right.
not like a gentle, oh, let's go
No, no,
down.
no, no, no. This is
Yeah.
holding your
Like
head. This is this
I
is
could not get away.
right.
Right.
There was no pushing away. There was no trying to fight out of this. It was holding me in place to not move.
So this can happen where someone's against a wall, like a girl is against a wall or a guy is against a wall and a penis is in their mouth and they are physically restrained by the wall, by someone's hands, to the point of, yes, as you said, choking, gagging, feeling as if you can't get away, feeling scared, feeling out of control of your body. I know that that was your experience because we had this discussion before. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that, but I bring it up because sexual acts between partners should be mutually desired. And the goal is, although sometimes people have issues reaching orgasm or seeking pleasure, mutual pleasure. So not only was this abusive, but even in the best of cases of scenarios, if it happened, holding someone's head does not allow for them to have agency over their body, freedom, lack of fear. I can only imagine how terrified you must have felt when that was happening, and it's upsetting to me because it was used as a form of punishment. It's upsetting to me because a lot of young women think that that's what oral sex is. That is not what oral sex is supposed to be. In fact, you didn't like oral sex that could be a very good reason why. I don't know anybody that would like the feeling of gagging, of not being able to catch their breath, of having something shoved down their throat. That is not what it is supposed to be. So I want to make that point, and I just want to maybe, ask you, did I miss any of the things of the feeling when that happens? Because I know there are a lot of girls out there that this has happened to.
No, you definitely nailed it on the head there. It is terrifying. It's like you can't escape. You can't you can't get to a safe space.
Yeah.
You're just stuck in that situation, hoping that it is going to end. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know anything. It just is aggressive. It's not comfortable. It's not pleasurable. It's terrifying. It makes you feel broken down. It makes you feel small. It makes you feel like all you are is a sex toy to them. It doesn't make you feel like a person anymore.
And you know what? That is how they're treating you. And what they're learning from is porn. I don't know whether your boyfriend used porn, but they're learning from porn to make hate to women. And the anal sex too. I mean, the way that that happened, you know, the statistics on women who enjoy anal sex to begin with are very low. Even gay men, it's very low. It is not common like people would think in the gay community. It's just kind of a misunderstanding that that is, you know, every man in who's gay is having anal sex. That's just actually not true. But even for women, it's uncomfortable. And the way that that happened for you, again, we have to frame it in the fact that it was abusive, but it was not only abusive, it was violent and it was rough and it was without any dignity or consideration or compassion
Or
or
consent.
love, consent for the person that this person was supposed to love. Anal sex doesn't happen that way. And I hear that so many times, so many times. There's stupid ass memes or gifs or whatever you want to call them that have, a girl crying and it says like, when you want to have anal, but you don't have enough time to lube her up. Like this is part of culture. And I'm so sorry that this is your story. I really am. And again, I have to say a million times, I'm so grateful that you're willing to share it.
I want to ask you two things. Well, and Stephanie. So, Ruth, did you or do you now realize that this, I mean, I'm not sure if I would call it abuse or assault or what category that is, but did you or do you realize that this is illegal? Like this is forcible and not lawful for him to do?
I never knew it was illegal, but I know now that this is not okay. And I know to either expect better for myself and that I deserve better. I deserve somebody that is going to respect my boundaries, somebody that understands that I can't perform these certain things because of the trauma that I've been through.
Right.
And if I get into a relationship, if they immediately ask for oral sex or anal, then no, I'm not going to do this. And
Right.
if they pressure into doing this, I'm like, you know what? You don't respect my boundaries, so I'm going to cut it off here.
Yeah, and you have every right to do that. But I think that's part of the education for men too. It must be so confusing because if they think that what happens in porn is legal and then they're doing those things. I read on Reddit when Stephanie loves Reddit, and when Stephanie told me about this whole concept, and I've heard of it before, but when I was kind of diving in to understand it a little more, I heard men say, "Oh, it's a real turn on when they gag. When somebody gags, that's a huge turn on. Like that's the goal here. Get them to gag." And that is directly, as you would say, Steph, from a porn script, because naturally seeing another person suffering or gagging is not a turn on. Like that's when I hear somebody throwing up, it makes me sick. Like it makes me nauseous. That's not a normal response. So it clearly has been programmed by porn.
He never thought of it as like a turn on for me. He always
Right.
just thought, I find more pleasure in a hole that's smaller. And so he would want to do oral sex to get it as deep down my throat as possible because that's what felt good to him.
That's horrifying. I just have to keep saying that. That's
Yeah.
horrifying that somebody was so disrespectful, so abusive to you. That is literally straight out of a porn script, and I'm gonna explain that in one quick second, but I just wanna say something to something you said before. You didn't realize, Dr. Chez said, "Did you realize that that was illegal?" And I wanna say something to every person out there, male or female. Because you date someone, because you are married to them, because you are in a situationship, anything, you do not own them. They do not owe you anything. They do not owe you sex whenever you want it. Marital rape, sadly, was outlawed in like the late 90s. You cannot force someone to do something, no matter what the relationship, bond, legal, or just boyfriend, girlfriend. You cannot force someone to do something. It is illegal. So I want that to be very clear. If you are doing something in your relationship that you do not want to do, no one has the right to assume, because you said you'd have sex with them, that you will also have anal, that you will also accept forcible blowjobs, that you will also do all of these things. No, you don't have to have threesomes. You don't have to do anything. That is the first thing I want you to know. And the second thing is Dr. Chez brought up porn. And I want to explain just very briefly that we become conditioned, like Dr. Chez said, the normal response to seeing someone hurting or throwing up is we recoil as human beings. We are naturally, I believe, compassionate. Unless you're like a sociopath, you have compassion. You see someone hurting, you don't want to hurt them, right? You're in a relationship, you don't want to. What is happening with porn is, and I'm going to give you a mouse study, a rat study. They took mice that were they had sexually matured, and it was their first experience to have sex or copulate as animals. And they took the female mice and they put little vests on them. And then they put them in a little container with male sexually mature rats. And they copulated with them for a week, 2 weeks. I don't know what it was, a little period of time. So their experience was the male rats, no vests. The female rats all had little vests on. After the period of time that they learned, to have sex, they then put in female mice without vests on. And the rats would not copulate with the rats that had no vests on. They had learned that the mice with rats, the rats with vests on were the only ones that they should copulate with. That shows you how your mind, how your brain sets a sexual template. So even though a rat with a vest is not a normal thing at all, these rats learned only to want to have sex with the rats that had vests on. That should explain to people when they're confused about how pornography can train someone to see violence and expect that their partner should be scared when they're having sex with them. When their partner is vomiting, that's acceptable. When their partner is pulling away or not giving consent, that's arousal to them. So just try to keep that in mind, that somebody who has been watching porn for a long time has learned a lot of really unhealthy behaviors, and it is literally conditioned into their brain.
And
And then the unfortunate thing is women like you, Root, or people like you think the same thing. Like, I guess this is okay, or I guess he's telling me it's okay, or he's telling me he'll be happy with me after this. It's my punishment. Maybe I did all these things go through the other person's mind to kind of rationalize. And so these things do go on for 4.5 years or 2 years or whatever, way longer than they should, or, that is healthy, but that's a sad part. So that's why you speaking out, yay, this is so important. And we want to get to your second story too. Do you want to share that one now?
I'd stopped dating for a few years just to kind of learn myself a little bit more, get myself a little bit more grounded. And I met my next boyfriend through some mutual friends, some mutual long-term friends. And they're like, he's great. He's really good with people. He's got a lot of the same interests that you do. He's older than you, but we think you guys would be like a great match. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So he was 12 years older than me. And I was like, okay, well, we'll try this out. And it started off great. Like he wanted to take me on dates. He was super sweet to me, just kind of wanted to spoil me. And when it started getting into sex, at first it was fine. It was, normal consenting sex. And I have to say that specifically, it was normal consenting sex. It was pleasurable for both people. But after like a few months of getting into this, he no longer wanted to do normal sex. He goes, I like more kinky stuff. And I didn't really understand what that meant. I personally, I don't watch porn. I think it's degrading for men, for women. I think it's really degrading. And he had told me that he only really liked doing two things to a woman. And that was anal and something called fisting, where he would physically try to get his entire fist into my vagina. And I had told him, no, that I'm not into that. And I was living with him. I was kicked out of where I was living, out of my townhouse, and I had moved in with him, and he would say, "Oh, I want to get my whole fist into you tonight." And if I said no, he'd be like, "All right, you can go ahead and pack your stuff and you can go. You can find someplace else to live." And I was with him for like a year and a half. I really thought I was in love with this guy. 100%. Truly. And so I was like, well, I've got no place else to go. I don't have enough money to go get another place to live here. So I would have to comply. And it was painful. I felt like I was being ripped in half. I felt like I was just an object for him to get off on. He ended up actually cheating on me, which is what made me call it quits. Because I definitely I draw 100% hard line. You're going to cheat, I'm out the door. And I'm glad he cheated on me, because I'm glad that I'm out of that relationship, because that made me feel terrible. It made me feel like, once again, just a sex toy to be used for somebody else's pleasure. And I didn't feel like my boundaries were being heard. And I won't put up with being treated that way. Never again. I want everybody to understand that things like this, that feeling this way, that being physically in pain and crying, it's not okay. That's not a relationship. And people need to understand that no way should they be feeling like this, to get out at the very first sign of feeling like this. If they do it once, they will not stop doing it. And they should not have to feel like the way I have felt. They shouldn't have to go through the amount of trauma to be so fearful of another human being that they could treat you this way again.
Ooh, there is a lot to unpack. Go ahead, Dr. Chez.
What I'm wondering, Root, is given your growth and perspective now and your grounded kind of stance of your hard lines and where you are today, in looking back, because I think this is helpful for young women, in looking back, why do you think you let either and both of these things go for as long as it did? Like what is it in young women, and we've all been there, that we've all been in things that, were not healthy, but we stayed in longer. So I don't want to, like, I'm not judging anything. I'm just saying, like, what do you think was at the root? I love that word so much. What do you think was at the root of this for you?
I was brought up in a way that you get the love that you deserve. When I say that, it's, if you're being treated this way, you probably deserved it. And that's what I was brought up to believe, that you get the love that you deserve. And it took me years to understand that I didn't deserve to be, quote, loved like that. That was not okay to go through. I want to press so hardly that you don't get the love that you think you deserve. You have to set your boundaries. You have to say, no, I deserve better. I deserve my boundaries to be heard. I deserve my boundaries to be met. I deserve somebody who understands my past and to work with me and not force me into something. That's a big thing, because I didn't grow up watching porn. I didn't grow up like that. I mean, I watched my dad and my stepmother from a young age. I watched them physically beat each other.
Mhm.
And they're still married. I don't really know how, but they are still married. And I look at them and go, which one of you deserves to be treated that way towards each other? I've watched my mother go through 4 marriages now, thinking that the next one was going to be better than the last. And the marriage that she's in now, her husband, she could not want sex, and her husband will still force it on her. Her current husband. And I watch that relationship and I go, where do you think that you deserve this? Mind you, my mother is the one that taught me this. Taught me that I deserved what I got. If you love the person, you're going to want to make them happy. And that's just not true.
Right. Not at all.
I'm glad you said that about your mom, because I was going to ask you. I remember that you told us that your mom said something about, like, you have to do what you have to do to keep your partner happy. And I think that's really unhealthy advice, but it seems like, and I'm not judging your family, because there's a lot of people who have dysfunctional families, but you learned a lot of dysfunction from the people around you, because if your father and your stepmother are beating each other up and your mother is being forced to do things in her relationship, it seems as though neither of your primary caregivers had a lot of understanding about what a healthy relationship was.
Even if it's not physical beating up, so many children watch their parents emotionally, verbally, yeah, maybe physically, sexually, whatever, beat each other up. Like, you're right. We don't have good modeling for healthy relationships. We don't have it on TV, a little bit, but not really. We don't have really the ways to do that to resolve these things. And so they keep getting repeated generationally. So
How is she supposed to know,
Well,
right?
and
Like,
then
how
who
is
are you
she
gonna
supposed
learn
to
from?
know?
well,
Yeah.
and then I want to add in one more thing here. I grew up also in a family that where I was told you do not tell anybody. And if I could put that specific word into bold letters, I would. I was told you do not tell anybody of your personal problems. You do not talk to a therapist. You do not talk to a counselor. You do not talk to your friends. You do not talk to anybody. Your problems need to stay behind closed doors. And it took me years to figure out that no, you can't go through this alone. You shouldn't go through this alone. Because if you do, you are repeating the same situations over and over again because you can't talk to anybody. You can't tell somebody what you're going through, and for somebody who doesn't know you, like if you go see a therapist where it's a third party who knows nothing about you. They just are there to listen to your situation to tell you, no, this is not okay. This is not right. That's the family I was brought up into. You don't talk to anybody. If you go to a family gathering, and I had been to a family gathering this year, and I had asked honestly some of my family members, why do we not talk to each other?
Mhm.
Why is it that we can't communicate with each other about anything? And one of my uncles told me that it's just not what we do in our family.
That's a very generational thing, and, it continues today, but, like, I remember my mother, you either got that or you got a version of "Don't air your dirty laundry," there was some version of that where people were silenced, and I wanna
Same
say
situation,
speak
just a different word.
right.
Yeah.
I wanna speak to exactly what you're saying because when I was 8 years old, I was molested by a karate teacher, and I immediately told people, and I can remember my mom being like, "You don't have to tell people," and I will say, like, there were times I said it in my, like, I don't know, 5th grade class, and the word spread because 5th graders don't know how to keep their mouth closed, and that was hurtful, but every time I spoke and every time I told my truth, I got stronger. And that was something that I learned very early on. And I never listened to my mother. And she would always say, "Why do you have to tell everybody everything?" And I literally think that that is what saved me and what helped me to heal from things that happened in my life because I knew that talking was catharsis. And so I want to say that because we are at a point now where more people are aware of mental health issues. A lot of mental health issues stem from these unhealthy family dynamics. And the only way to get through it is to have that third party to talk to your friend. Your friend might have grown up in an equally abusive house, but they also might have grown up in a really healthy home. And they might be able to say, I don't know, my parents don't do that. And maybe that's just the insight that you need to go, oh, life can be different. I don't have to be in a relationship where my parents diminish me. I don't have to be in a relationship with a boyfriend who forces me to have anal sex. Talking is going to heal, is going
Yeah.
to heal.
To just summarize this, families like mine, they want to keep situations behind closed doors.
Mhm.
They don't want the whole world to know what you went through. They don't want to be looked at in a different way.
Mhm.
And it's sad. They want to be looked at differently. They don't want to be judged. They don't want, somebody saying, "Oh, that was your child." They and they just they want to keep everything behind closed doors to not be judged.
In a way, it's like the social media of today. It's a filter that's inauthentic that, puts this phony front on.
You could only show the good things.
Right.
You can't show what's actually going on.
And the sad thing is that hurts children. It forces us to be in inauthentic relationships and inauthentic like lives. But I want to go back to something that you said because I think it's important. You said you felt like you were an object for your boyfriend to get off on, and that is true. You are not, but it is true that that's the way somebody who is really into porn looks at their partner. They're not having sex with you. They're reenacting something that they saw in porn, and you are the object that's going to get them there. You are the means to the end. And that sounds really horrible, but it's actually really true. You can't be with another body that isn't desirous of something, and their mind has clicked over into something that they're on a track. They're like almost like conditioned, mouse going
Rants.
through a rat maze, and you become the means to their end. So I do want to say your body picked up on an actual reality. That is what you were. And it's hard to say. I also want to I know that this is like I'm going on here, but your boundaries were not being heard. Boundaries are so important in any healthy relationship. So yes, you were right. This person did not respect your boundaries. But more importantly, I had a thought. You said you drew a hard line at cheating but he was abusive. He was abusive the whole time, but you drew a hard line at cheating. That is a power dynamic that he was using over you. Again, another sign of an unhealthy relationship. He used the power that you were living in his home and that you had nowhere to go, and he knew that, and he was using that in the same way that your earlier boyfriend was using his age and his coolness and the fact that he made you feel pretty. That was his power over you. I think maybe if he was your same age or he had less, you were in high school, he was either in college or out of college. Either one made him look appealing to a young person. So that power dynamic was alive in both of your relationships. But what I want to say about your hard line in the cheating and not in the abuses, we have become so accustomed to being disembodied that we are forsaking our body. Our body is our temple. It is what is the most important thing. And your name root, you're grounding into yourself. You're knowing yourself. You are speaking your truth every time you now set your boundaries where you're so strong in your boundaries, which you will be able to say, like how you approach relationships now. But you are becoming embodied. And the reason that you drew the line at cheating was because you didn't even realize that this body deserved all of the dignity and respect that you would give to any other human. And I just want to say that to everybody because I think we've all become disembodied. Maybe it's because we live so much in our heads, we're filtering, we're doing all of this stuff, and it's just appearances. It's not here. It's not here. It's not authentic. And I just want to encourage every young person to realize that abuse of your body is every bit as bad as someone cheating on you. Cheating on you hurts the heart, but forsaking your body hurts your soul.
It does. And now that I am older, I couldn't press this enough. And that is for anybody that is listening to this. If you're going to get into a relationship, if you meet anybody, please, please give it time. Get to know the person, really know the person before you jump into bed with them. I give 3 to 6 months before I jump into bed with somebody. And I don't tell them I'm giving them this time frame. And that's because if you tell the person, "Hey, I want to give it at least 3 months," then they have in their mind, "Oh, at exactly 3 months, she's going to give it up to me." And so just mentally to yourself, give it a time frame. Say, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to give it 3 months. If in 3 months I have seen, this many red flags, they have tried to do this, whether it's at 3 months or within that 3 months or 6 months, whatever time frame you decide. When you see a red flag, call it quits. Call it quits because that person is not going to respect your boundaries. Say, "No, I am done. This person is not for me." Because once your boundary has been broken, you can't take that back. That is a permanent mark on you. Even if nobody else can see that mark, that is a permanent mark on you. And you don't want that. You don't want to feel and carry that burden and trauma with you the rest of your life. And sometimes it takes that long to get through it.
I want to just say, when you're saying mark, it's a permanent hurt. It's a permanent scar. It's a permanent wound that takes a long time to heal.
Yeah.
I think that's what you mean, rather than like somebody is bad for doing it. What you're saying is this becomes your wound that you alone get to carry for the rest of your life.
Yes.
What you're doing by going against the programming you had to kind of zip it and move on. You're going against that by sharing your story here, sharing your story in any way that you do, or sharing your truth of what you've been through and who you are. The more you do that, the more you are healing those wounds. And they don't have to be permanent. They're not who you are. They're a part of your past, but they're not who you are. And that's why I asked you, when you write out your story, to end with, "And today, dot, dot, dot." Did you do it that way?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Okay, can you share with us what you wrote with "and today, dot, dot, dot"?
So I wrote, "And today, this does not define me. This has made me stronger. This has made me into the person I am today."
Yes, that's what is really important. If you can print that, cut that out, put that on the bathroom mirror, put that in your car, that's exactly the truth. That is who you are today. And very important to know that. And you've done that. You've survived. You are strong. You are exactly where you are today. I also feel one last thing, when Stephanie talked about you saying the word hard line, I love that. You had a hard line for cheating, and we all have those things in our heads, but I think they need to be voiced, written down, clear as day. My hard line is abuse. My hard line is walking on eggshells. My hard line is feeling like I'm not respected, or my boundaries are, whatever those things are beyond cheating. You were really clear about cheating, but I think it's important for all women, men, whoever, girls, boys, to be really clear on, here's my hard line. This is my hard no. This is not okay. And those things can be universal, because they probably are, but they're not voiced in today's world. And they're not clear, because it's wishy-washy of, was that okay? But it wasn't. So being really clear on your hard line things is a really good practice.
And a lot of porn informed sex can be abusive, especially when one person is like, especially when one person doesn't know what it is, and then when it happens and they're like not comfortable with it, and then it gets used against them, like it's abusive. So I think that's really true, Dr. Chez. As you go along, you may learn some things in each successive relationship. And maybe another thing gets to add it onto there until you've like got the list of these are my hard no's.
And love and sex should never be punishment. Like those don't go together.
It's like a dance. You are with the other person and you are responding to their body and they're responding to your body. That is one of the worst parts of porn. I mean, even if somebody doesn't get addicted, even if somebody doesn't pick up those things, it's the fact that someone has a mental movie playing in their brain and they're not with their partner. They are playing out the scenario from porn and their partner is again the means to the end. You're not embodied. That person is just an object. You're not connecting and playing off of each other's emotions and feelings and arousal. It's really just a rat in a maze.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Root. I am really grateful. We are really grateful for you sharing this because I think this opens a door of discovery for other young people, hopefully, of like, oh, wait, okay, So thank you so much for sharing that. And I just love that that is your name because we can't grow without roots. So the image of you kind of really coming to the root place of the core and growing from there, I see that.
My name is not it's not just growing, it's growing into the earth. It's being in a place that is secure. It's in a place where you feel safe.
Mhm.
When you look at a root of trees on a big beautiful tree, they're so deep in the ground and they are protected. They are safe and
Mhm.
they can grow again. Even if the tree is cut down 100 times, those roots, your safety is protected.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty and your willingness to share to help other young people because I know, as you said, this is one of the first times you shared a lot of this and it is not easy. So thank you.
Thank you, Root. Keep growing and feeling into your protection, and you know how to get there. Those hard lines, you know that. So we wish you all the best in all of that.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us for this wrap up session about today's really powerful podcast. We are always so grateful for these young people that share so openly. And I can't tell you how many times I hear in therapy, but now we're hearing it on this podcast. People saying, I've never shared this before, or I've never said this out loud before, I've never talked about this. The healing power of doing that is what therapy is all about. This is therapeutic because people are sharing very important things and we don't take it lightly. This is trauma and you heard that while Root was sharing. But this is trauma and the body and the mind can go back there so quickly. And so I want to say that when that happens to anybody in our listening audience, when you review your traumas, or even if you do share it with a person that isn't a therapist, or if it's a therapist that isn't going to do what we did, do this for yourself. Root yourself. Remember her name. It is like the best name she could have come up with for her situation. But really root yourself. And the reason why I start with the feet is because that is the exact opposite of our mind. Like you want the polar opposite of your mind. So focusing on the feet, you can focus on hands or something else too, but focusing on the feet really does bring us out of that trauma response and brings us into the body, out of the mind, into the body in a healing, healthy way. So that was a really good practice, and I encourage everybody to do that. It's so easy, and it's feet first, just remember that, and root just like our gal. The other thing, when we talk about myths, and Stephanie and I are really catching these myths lately, she mentioned 3 myths, maybe you guys caught more, but she mentioned 3 myths that are so important for us to myth bust. I'm gonna go through them quickly. One is, you have to keep a boyfriend happy. That is a myth, myth, myth. We cannot keep anybody happy. We cannot make anybody happy. Nobody can make us happy. It's really important that we step aside from that myth that that's something we're supposed to do in relationship. We don't do that. When you get in that mindset, you compromise yourself, and that's dangerous territory, as we heard. Secondly, she talked about her family saying, don't tell anyone our business. As I said before, healing happens when you share your secrets. The AA whole premise, their whole thing is on, sharing the secrets is a way to heal. And our secrets keep us sick. It's really important that we don't have those things. That's what I see constantly in therapy. Those things that we don't share are the things that keep us mentally unwell. The third myth is, you get the love you deserve. No, 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 no. You deserve love. Period. End of story. That's it. It's not you get the love you deserve. It's we all not deserve, we all are worthy beings of love, first from ourselves, and then beautiful if it comes from other people too. Comes from the divine, whatever that is to you, comes from within, and it's lovely if it comes from other people, but it's not about a deserving. 3 myths must bust. Okay, take it over to you, Steph.
I really love that last thing that you said because I think about this a lot of times with abundance. People always think like, "Oh, that person is successful and that person is successful and I can't do it. There's no room for me." And it's sort of the same idea about what you were talking about because as a being on this planet, if you got here, I don't know what your belief system is, but you are entitled to love. You will be best able to do your purpose on this planet when you experience love. I'm not saying sometimes we don't find our purpose through pain. That actually is true, I think a lot of times, but you are deserving of love. And it's not like the other person got this great person and you can't also. There is enough love to go around. So I want people to remember that that is not something that is exclusive to certain types of people, no matter who you are. If you work on yourself, and Root does have a lot of things to work on because she came from a home that was traumatic in and of itself. We didn't really delve into that, but she did come from that. So it's easy to think when you come from that that you don't deserve it or you can't find it, but that's not true. Work on yourself and love will come to you and everyone deserves it. The 2 most important things I think from Root's story that stood out to me are power dynamics. Both of these relationships were such good examples, and they really underscore what happens when we are in relationships with imbalance of power, right? The first one, there was only a 2-year age difference, but it was a huge difference because she was in high school and he was out of high school, which means he was either working or he was in college. Both of those kind of give someone the idea who's young and vulnerable and still in their family the idea of freedom. She saw him as free. She saw him as somebody who was older, who had maybe he was making money at a job. Maybe he was in college and around educated young women and having experiences like more worldly experiences than someone in high school would have. That power dynamic can lead us to making poor choices. The second relationship she was in was a guy who was 12 years older. He was more established. He had an apartment. She was living under his roof. That really made her vulnerable because he was the one paying the rent. And like she said, when she wouldn't put out the sexual kinks and do the sexual kinks that he wanted, he said, okay, well, you can leave. So he had such a power grip over her. It's not always age, it's not always money. There are a lot of ways that power dynamics can manifest in relationships. And I want you to think about these because you could be in one. Student teacher, that is a very unhealthy power dynamics, which is the same as like kind of a boss and employee, somebody with more power over you to change their trajectory. You don't get a raise A's. You don't get the grade you want. They have a lot of power over you. Someone with money and someone without. Clearly, that's a power dynamic that we see play out in Hollywood. They also might be somebody with power or status or privilege versus a person without status and privilege, right? You also can have like an able-bodied or a physically handicapped person. So you have able-bodied or healthy person and a person who's physically handicapped or sick or something like cancer, that makes someone vulnerable. If one person in a dynamic has a vulnerability that the other person can manipulate, that is an unhealthy balance of power. Now, I'm not saying that all relationships have to have balanced power, but there has to be an acknowledgement that there is an imbalance of power, and there has to be very clear, healthy communication, and not one partner trying to use whatever it is, money, status, a job, over the other person to get them to do what they want them to do. Another way that can show up is a healthy family background versus an unhealthy. A person in an unhealthy family background sometimes doesn't know that the person that how to behave in a healthy manner. And also with sexuality, that is a huge one today. Somebody who is bisexual in a relationship with someone of the opposite sex may feel vulnerable because they are also in something that is maybe not heteronormative and accepted by society. That's also very clear with trans people, if you're a trans person. So there are a lot of ways that power dynamics can show up in relationships and be super unhealthy. That requires extra communication and acknowledgement. I also want to say color. Race is a big one too. If are you in white spaces, white communities, or are you in Hispanic communities, Hispanic spaces, Hispanic group of friends, and you're the white person or the Black person? Those kind of dynamics can really leave someone feeling vulnerable and without a voice. And then the second thing I want to say is about sex. She had so many issues with sex that I wanted to just scream and say, no, girl, sex should never feel unsafe. Sex, every act that you have during a sexual encounter should be mutually desired. You ask, you get consent for it, but it should be mutually desired, not manipulated out of someone, not threatened out of someone. The outcome of sex typically is mutual pleasure. Now, it doesn't mean people have to have an orgasm, but it should be mutually pleasurable. No one should be in pain because of it. And the best sexual experiences are one where you are embodied, and I need to explain that. You are not the means to orgasm for another person. They are experiencing you as a human being. You are experiencing them as your partners, your human being. They are flesh. You can feel their flesh. You are not in a track like a rat in a maze doing what you need to do to get off. You are having an embodied experience with another person who's also embodied, and together those bodies are in a communication with each other. And then last, I'll go back to my favorite quote from Wendy Maltz: healthy sex has no negative outcomes. So I know I just went on a tirade, but power dynamics and healthy sex are so important to so many young people.
Yes, great job, Steph. So important, all these topics. So I know we could go on and on and on for days. But what I want to say in response to the disembodied part, in order to cope with trauma, it's a known thing that we actually escape our body. That's how we survive it. If you've experienced trauma, which most people have in some respects, but if you've experienced trauma to the body, that can happen, right? So this happened with her, and then it becomes a repeated pattern where she no longer even knows how to, or know, I've heard people say this, knows what is pleasurable to them because they've been so long disembodied from the experience because of early trauma. This takes work and this takes therapeutic intervention. I really want to stress that. If you've had trauma, and that's what we wanted to make sure for Root too, is that it's an opportunity, it's an invitation to heal this stuff. When you hear this podcast, as much as it's an investment in time, energy, commitment, everything else, please give yourself the gift of healing. We all need that so that you don't have disembodied sex for your whole life, because we're disembodied living, like we live that way in our heads and out of the whole heart and body. So anyway, I just want to say that this can be in part of a healing process, and I've seen it and I know it. And please seek out, we'll add some notes about how to do that, but please seek out a therapist to help with that if you've had these kind of traumas, because they're intense. They're not easy. And you can't just think, let me root and it'll go away. That's a start, but there's a lot more to it. So thank you for pointing all those things out, Steph.
Yeah, and I just want to also just throw in there, no one is saying that you shouldn't have sex if you are not embodied, right? Like, no, I'm not saying, I'm
Right.
not suggesting that. This is a journey, sometimes a lifelong journey, sometimes a journey that takes 6 months, 6 years, who knows, a long time, you may even go back to it. But the point is, the awareness of the fact that you are out of your body is the first step to realizing something is wrong. I have to shift something. I have to work deeper on something. Something is causing me to jump out of my body. So I want to point that out. But remembering that embodied is, this is a person I am with. I am a person deserving of all the pleasures and all the feels of my body, not pain, not being outside looking in or just completely dissociating. So we're all entitled to relationships at whatever stage, but it just shows you might need a little more work or a lot more work. So thank you for listening today. Thank you for making time for us every Sunday at 7 a.m. And we hope to see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Chez Leeby and Stephanie Boye based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guests that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7onsundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.